The Christmas Gospel, according to St. Luke, says it this way. They went to Bethlehem, and there Mary gave birth to the child and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. What a story. And yet we've heard it so many times we could recite it in our sleep. Yet it's filled with so much mystery and meaning. If we grew to be 210, we would barely begin to plumb the depth of the mystery of the incarnation, the Word made flesh. The one eternal God, whom earth and heaven adore, sleeping in a box of straw. Heaven and earth have become one. Because as John tells us, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. It's also interesting to note in the Christmas Gospel that when the angels appeared to the shepherds on that Judean hillside, on that first Christmas, to announce the marvelous birth of the Messiah, the angel says a very intriguing thing. This is what they say. Here's how you know it's the right baby. This will be a sign to you, says the angel. You will find the baby wrapped in strips of cloth, lying in a manger. In other words, here's the tip-off. You'll find this baby born in a barn, wrapped in rags, laying in a feeding trough. I find it so ironic that in our day and age, when you see a nativity scene, it always looks so pristine and neat. We have a tendency in our modern culture to sanitize the nativity, neaten up the scene. As a Pittsburgher would say, red it up. We smear Vaseline on the camera lens to soften the rough edges. And we bring and dial the lighting down to romantic. The figures, I don't know if you've noticed in the nativity, always look like they just got out of the shower and have freshly moussed their hair. Their robes looked pressed from Chidos, and they're already in their best fare from Isaac Baker's. But on that first Christmas, in the actual barn where Jesus was born, it wasn't that way. Because the cave, the barn, the manger, it's a messy place. I'll guarantee you that when Mary found out that that was where she was going to give birth to her baby, she didn't say to her betrothed Joseph, "Hey, they're putting us in the stables. Sweet. This shall be a sign to you." Here's how you know it's the right baby. You'll find him wrapped in cloths, lying in a manger. In other words, you'll recognize him because he shows up in the messiest place you can imagine. No power, no money, no fanfare, no applause, no newspapers, no headlines. Born in a barn, wrapped up in rags, surrounded by animals, entrusted to this poverty-stricken couple, the King of the universe, the Alpha and Omega, enters into human history in a little bundle wrapped in obscurity and poverty and humility, because this is Jesus' signature. Because there is no place that Jesus won't go. Because there's nothing he won't do. Because there are no depths to which he will not descend in order to bring God's power and God's love and God's grace and God's peace and God's goodness and his presence to anybody who will seek after him. This will be the sign to you. You'll see God in a messy place. I thought of this several weeks ago at the Erie City Mission's annual Christmas party for our guests, for the men who are sheltered under our roof at 11th and French. After a wonderful potluck meal and an opportunity to sing the carols of the season, each man in our shelter received a very thoughtful Christmas present. For many of those men, it would be the only Christmas present they will receive this year. When all the gifts had been distributed with applause and smiles, we all were given a candle, and we made a huge circle around the perimeter of the public dining room where each day 200 to 300 people are fed. And as the lights of the room were darkened and the candlelight began to glow, the musicians began to tune their instruments and we began to sing that famous German carol, Silent Night, Holy Night, all is calm, all is bright. And in the glow of candlelight, with some very off-key carol singing filling the room, I looked into the eyes of men, mismatched, razzle-tazzle, a group of homeless men. And I whispered to my wife, who was standing next to me, and I said to her, "He'd come here, wouldn't he?" "Who?" Kathy said. "Jesus," I answered. If Jesus were born tonight, and the choices were between the best subdivision in Erie, and we'll not take votes on which subdivision that is, but if the choice were between the best subdivision in Erie or the Erie City Mission, I bet he'd be born here. He'd come here, wouldn't he? My wife looked up at me and she said, "He sure would." You see, Jesus doesn't really care how messy life is. It doesn't scare him away. Why is that? Because he started his life in a mess, dressed in strips of cloth, laid in a manger. The stench of urine and sheep dung hung heavy in the air, majesty in the midst of the divine. And think about it. Not only did he begin his life in a messy place, but interestingly, he also ended his life in a messy place, a place called Golgotha, wrapped in rags and hung on a cross. And between the first day and his last day, Jesus mostly hung out with some pretty messed up people. People that you and I probably would reject and walk to the other side of the street to try to avoid. People like Mike and Alan and Tom and Gary, some of the men that I work with every day. Men who humbly bring their messed up lives to God. And just as he did 2,000 years ago, so he does today. God takes those messes and those people, and he keeps loving them and embracing them and teaching them about a new and a better life. That's what he does. Messes don't scare him away, because it's his signature.